Hi everyone, welcome to Mr. Dear Docs channel. Today we'll be learning about ASP.NET Core. In the ASP.NET Core, one of the most important concepts that is working with database. There is an approach called Entity Framework Core, which will help us to work with database to retrieve the database objects, database information and all. Today I will try to cover Entity Framework Code first approach. Okay, to avoid confusion, I segregated this concept into 5 layers. That is, first of all, we'll create SQL Server. Means, first of all, we'll work with SQL Server and create required tables. The second one is like, what are the tables we created in the SQL Server? We'll try to create the POCO classes in our ASP.NET Core Web API application. The third one is like, we'll create DB context for our SQL Server database. Fourth one, we'll try to register Entity Framework context in our middleware. Finally, we'll try to invoke our employees API controller to retrieve the list of employees present in our database. Let me start with SQL Server. That is, we'll try to create a DB which contains list of employees information that references to the department ID. Means finally we are going to create two tables, one with list of employees information. Each employee contains one department ID and each department contains list of employees information. That is nothing but finally we are going to create two tables, that is one with employees and the second one is like department. Let me come back here, come back to SQL Server SSMS and create a database. I am naming it as employee info. Let's create our two tables, that is employees table and department table. Employees table, create table, table name employees, contains three columns: employee ID integer with identity 1 comma 1 and it's a primary key. Let's correct the typo. Employee name varchar of 50, the maximum size is 50. As we discussed, this employee's department ID references to departments table. That's nothing but department ID with integer. We are done with employees table. Let me create a department table. Create table department, which contains only two columns: department ID with the identity 1 comma 1 foreign key, sorry, primary key, and it contains a column with department name, that is nothing but varchar of 10 means maximum length of 10. Now we are done with two tables, that is one with employees and the other table with department. Let me just run this table once. Select star from employees. Currently we are not having any data. We'll insert the data post referencing department ID to department table as well. Let me select the same way. Let me select from department as well. Okay, we are done with tables creation. The next step is like, let's add a reference, that is nothing but foreign key. Alter table employees. We are adding primary key. We are adding foreign key for the column department ID. It references to table department of DEPT. A typo. It thrown us a foreign key relationship because the table name is wrong. Department. Let's correct the table name. Okay. Now we are done with tables creation and the foreign key references. Now each employee contains one department, that is nothing but one to many relationship. Along with the same way, each department contains each department contains more than one employee. That is nothing but many to one. Okay, this analysis will help us to creating our POCO classes. Now let's go and insert some data. Inserting data into employees table and department table. Now first we need to create some data into masters department table. That is nothing but insert into department table. Values are HR department and IT department. Let's add one more department, that is nothing but account department, and one last department, that is finance. These are the four departments which my arg will contains. Let's insert four rows into this. Okay. The finally we are left with only one table, that is inserting information into our employees table. Values are employee name Rama. This guy belongs to HR department. Krishna belongs to IT department. Rama Krishna belongs to account department. The final one, that is nothing but Mukunda belongs to finance department. Now we are done with inserting records into department table and as well as employees table. This is our master table and this is our employees information which contains the employee name along with the department information. Let's execute the information. What are the records we are having in these tables? Select star from department and select star from employees. We are done with our insertion. Now next objective is like, let's go on to create. Next we need to create a ASP.NET Core Web API project. We'll extend this article completely to next level. Means any ASP.NET, any developer who is looking for a job, they can easily refer our project. If you have any questions just post us on comments. I will be able to help you. Next, let's go on to create our Visual Studio project. Currently, I'm having a professional which 2022. Let's run this. Microsoft Visual Studio 2022. I'm having IDE of Visual Studio, that is with the version 2022. As we discussed, I'm creating a new project. It will take a couple of minutes to load the existing templates. Okay, let's search with Web API. Yeah, now I'm planning to create a ASP.NET Web API template with the C# language. Okay, let's select ASP.NET C# Core Web API template. Click next. Name it EF Core POC. And if you verify, currently I'm using IDE 2022. That's the reason by default I'm having .NET 6.0 version. I am not having any plans to enable Docker, and yeah, I'm enabling Open API support because the Swashbuckle and Swagger will be automatically registered in our middlewares. Okay, in our next series of sessions, we'll be discussing about what is the use of middleware and all. Okay, click create. Once we click on create, it will take a couple of seconds to load our project along with the architecture. Okay, the first step what I will do usually, let's build our solution first. Okay, it will restore all our NuGet packages and all. Okay, let me build the solution one more time. Yeah, the build is succeeded. As we discussed, we are done with our SQL server tables creation. The next task is like, if I go to PPT, I'm done with ASP.NET Core Web API project also. Okay, we were able to create ASP.NET Core Web API project and named it as EF core POC. The next step is like, let's go and add a folder models which contains POCO classes. Right click on the project, add new folder. I am naming this folder as models. Okay, if you observe our SQL Server, we are currently having only two tables. That is nothing but one is department and one is employees information. I am adding two classes. One is employee. As usual, we have three properties in employee class. One is public int empid get set, public string emp name. The last and final one is public int dept id. Get set. Okay. Now we are creating our POCO classes. If we come back to our SQL Server IDE and observe here, each employee contains one department information. Now we are working on code first approach or model first approach. Now we need to have each employee contains one department information. Let's go on to create the same way. Let's go on to create department table as well. That is nothing but department POCO class. Department, I'm naming this as department. It contains two properties, DEPTID, public string DEPT name. Okay. Now, as we discussed, each department contains list of or I collection of employees. Means many to one. Each department contains many employees. Get and set. Now, department ID is nothing but it's a key. Actually, it's a primary key, and we are writing our data annotations here. Okay, now we are done with department completely. What we did is like whatever the properties are, whatever the columns present in our table, we have only two columns, that is department ID and department name. Department ID, it's a key, means department ID is a primary key. That's the reason we decorated this property with a key. And each department contains list of employees, means one department, that is just take HR department. HR department may contains more than one employee. That's the reason each department contains n number of employees. Let's come back to employee. In the same way, employee ID is a primary key. Let's add our data annotation here. Okay. The same way, each employee contains one department, that is department. The alias is department and gets it. And now we are done with our POCO classes. If you come back here, we are done with tables creation, and we were able to create a new project, aspnetcore web API project, and we named it as ESP core, EF core POC. And third one is like models, means we have created our POCO classes, nothing but plain object classes which contains employees and department information. In the same way, we were able to associate, or we were able to add the number of columns present in our database, and the same way we have established the relationships as well, because this is very important for interview as well. We were able to add decorate data annotations as well. Okay, now we are done with models. Let's close these two and come back to PPT. Next task is like DB context. Okay, let's go on to create a new folder. Add new folder. EF means Entity Framework DB context. I'm naming it as employee DB context. Employee DB context. Okay. Before that, I forgot to add one more point here. Okay. Once we are done with DB, once we are done with creating DB context, we need to register required NuGet packages. Required NuGet packages. That is nothing but EF core NuGet packages. Let me come back here and add those required NuGet packages. Right click on these dependencies. Click on manage NuGet packages. In the browse, let's just search with Entity Framework. Primarily here we need to work with two NuGet packages. That is nothing, one with the Entity Framework core, The another is like entity framework core.sql, SQL server. Okay, mainly we need to add two NuGet packages, that is nothing but entity framework core, and the other one is like entity framework core dot SQL server. Why? Because now we are working with SQL server. We need to register this entity framework context as a middle layer. Okay, let's go and install entity framework. That is the latest stable version is 6.10.4. If you are working with 2019, maybe you need to be installed with 5.0.0. Okay, that is the stable version for you. That is nothing but 5.0.0. In my case, I am using IDE 2022. That's the reason I am installing all the latest versions. In between, if you have seen any issues, please comment on my video. I will be able to help you. Okay, as we discussed, the next one is like first we are done with ASP.NET Core, Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. The next one is like we need to install Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.SQL Server. Let me install the latest stable version, that is 6.0.4. Now we are done with two required NuGet packages installation. Let me build this solution. Okay, once the build succeeded, next we need to create the skeleton for this employee DB context. That is, first this employee DB context will be inherited from DB context. Before to that, let's go and add that using statement here using Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. Okay, first let's go and add DB context. Okay, we are done with DB context, and if you click on here, okay, we'll be creating a constructor for this base class, that is employee DB context with IDB DB context options. DB context options builder. Here we need to provide our employee DB context. These are the options. These options will be shared with base class options. DB context options. Okay. Now we are done with base class implementation. That is, our DB context class is having a constructor with options. That is nothing but DB context options. The next step is like let's add the list of models present in our employees information database. Nothing but if you observe this models folder, we have two classes, that is one with department information, the another one is like employees information. Okay, now to avoid this namespace confusion, I'm removing this extension. Means I'm getting all these classes or other whatever present in this namespace under the same roof. Nothing but if you observe this, employee is also part of your EF core POC, department is also EF core POC, and employee DB context also is part of EF core POC. Okay, it's avoid the new namespace confusion, and it avoids the unnecessary usage of these namespaces. Now I am registering my two tables, a DB set of employee. Okay, alias is employees. I get a set. Next, we have only two tables, that is employee and department. Okay. Now we are done with the two parts. That is one with creating constructor, and the second one is registering DB sets. The third one is like if you observe carefully, our department, the class name and the properties are little different than whatever we created in our database. Okay, wantedly I have given some different names than present in our classes. Why? Because there is one more interesting topic present in the employee DB context, that is on model creating override space on model creating. This is one of the important concept present in the entity framework. Why? Because whenever the data model is on model is creating, then we need to there are set of properties we can be able to configure. For example, model builder dot entity. For example, if my entity is employee and the table mapping means the table present in the database is different. That is, if you come back here, the employee, the name is employee, table name is employees. Let's come back to here and map to this. Means the class or POCO class name is employee and my table name is employees. Means it's having two different collisions and two different names. For that reason, here I am registering or While creating the model, I am telling to the database that this employee POCO class contains your employee's information only. And if you observe here, the properties are also different actually. Okay, property employee e dot employee ID dot has column name of, let's come back here and copy the column name empid. In the similar fashion, we need to map each and every column present in this model to that respective column names. For example, here employee name and the same way department ID. Now e dot employee name map to the case is different actually. That's the reason I'm configuring each and every property dept map to dept. If you now we are done with mapping for employees table employees table. Now it's time for department table. Let's come back to department table. In the same way, model builder dot entity of, we know the POCO class name for department, and it mapped to table of our department. Let's copy and paste here. Nothing but property of department contains the two properties, that is department ID to this department as column name of department ID in our department table. To save some time, let's copy the two statement and paste here. Department next, it's time for department name. Come back here and copy the department name. Okay, now we are completely done with mapping employee ID, employee name, and department ID. In the similar fashion, we have mapped to department ID, department name to their respective column names. Okay, we'll improve this. We'll improve this same project to next level. Okay, please don't forget to follow my series of EF core. Okay, we'll be try to learn each and every statement uses in our further sessions. Okay, now don't deviate. Let's come back to our PPT here. Let me go back one more time. We are done with SQL Server tables creation, and we have created a project models. We are able to create POCO classes, a DB context, and finally, the next step is like we need to register. Means we are done with registering EF core NuGet packages as well. Now it's time for registering our middleware. Means now we need to register. Okay, we need to register this DB context to in our program.cs. Why we need to register this middleware? Now in ASP.NET Core, okay, we need to tell to this project what are the dependencies, like what are the services are depending on this project. This project or will be useful, will be able to use only these things. Means this builder is registered with controllers, and it is having endpoints API Explorer, and we are added Swagger generation like that. Means in the upcoming session we'll be able to learn each and every use of these things. Like for example, one of the important concept is like what is the difference between use, map, and run. The same way, like how we can be able to read, like how we can be able to segregate what is the use of environment dot each development, and what are the different kinds of environments we have. Okay, in our upcoming session we'll be able to I'll be able to cover all these concepts. Okay, now let's register our employee DB context to context as part of middleware. Let's in the builder.services dot. Okay, first to let's add our namespaces Microsoft dot Entity Framework Core. The next statement is like Microsoft dot Entity Framework Core dot SQL Server. Okay, these are the namespaces which will be part of our program.cs. Services dot add DB context. Now we know the DB context. Okay, that is the DB context is like employee DB context. Employee, the name is like employee DB context. Okay, it's part of EF core POC. Okay, let's add the options for employee DB context. Employee DB context dot. This DB context will be used to SQL Server. Use SQL Server. Server. If you observe here, there are primarily three overload methods. Okay, the one with a DB connection. First, we need to establish a DB connection for our. First, we need to establish a DB connection for our SQL Server. Means where this SQL Server is exist. Okay. Now we need to read. We are going to read that connection string from. We can hardcode this connection string, or we can be able to read. For example, I can be able to hardcode this connection string here. For example, a string connection string is equals to. Okay. We know the connection string like the server name where exactly this database contains. Let's come back to database and copy this server name. Server is equals to, and the next one is like database. We know the database name, that is nothing but emp info. Right click, rename, copy this and come back here, paste here. Let's append with at the rate to avoid this error backslash. Okay, semicolon. The third parameter is like trusted underscore connection is equals to true. The fourth one is like multiple active result sets is equals to true. Okay, this is the connection string. Okay, now we were able to build the connection string successfully, but instead of hard coding this connection string, okay, we can be able to read this connection string from. Okay, we can be able to read this connection string from application settings.json as well. In our upcoming session, so we will be able to discuss about what is this application settings.json and why we are seeing here application settings app settings.development.json, how to configure this development environment. For example, if I right click here and come back to the properties, okay, while building the application, and yeah, here you can see the list of properties in application, and here we have setup properties, and the same way like there were here we can see the packages, code analysis, debug, resources, and TypeScript. Okay, in our upcoming session we'll be discussing about each one of these properties and their importance. Okay, for now let's go with the say default one, that is application settings.development.json. Okay, let's go with the same environment, and instead of hard coding this connection string here, let's add this connection string. Let's move this connection string to app settings.development.json. Okay, if you observe this here, we are already having an key value pair, that is nothing but logging, and I'm adding one more property, that is nothing but connection strings. Let's name our connection string, that is employee DB context. Copy this connection string from here and paste here. Let's come back to program.cs and delete this connection string. Okay, and now if you observe this, as I'm in program.cs, that is with the latest version of .NET Core 6.0, now we can be able to see this configuration from builder dot configuration dot get connection string of. Okay, come back to application settings dot development dot json and copy the key name, that is employee DB context. Okay, if you are in the older versions of sorry, modified the build version here, come back here and try to read connection string from app settings dot development dot json, copy the key name and paste here. Okay, yes, if you are in the older versions of ASP.NET Core, then the dependency will be different. Instead of builder.configurations, there we can see a property with the public I configuration. Okay, just I'm saying for your reference. Don't get confused. There we have a property with the configuration. If you are in the newer versions, then we can see the configuration from builder.configuration.get connection string of employee DB context. Okay. Let's build the solution once. The build is success. Let's come back to our PPT. Okay, we're done with tables creation and API product creation, POCO classes, DB context. We are done with the employee DB context and install the required NuGet packages. For our project, we are saying that we are already using an entity framework that is with SQL Server instance. We registered our middleware as well. We are completely done with registering middleware as well in our project. Now we came to the last part, that is work with employee DB context to read list of employees information. Let's come back to our solution. If you expand this controller, here we are going to place our new controller. Okay, let's let's show the steps actually. Right click on the project, add class, add new item, our controller, our class. These three ways we can be able to create our new controller. If I click class, I need to add the all attributes, and that class will be inherited from API controller and all. Instead of avoiding this entire code, let's go to new item and ASP.NET Core. Here we can see ASP.NET controller empty, and there is another way. Right click, add controller. By default, it will be shown us with the MVC controller, but now we need to create an API controller, that is API controller with empty. I'm not having any plans to create a API controller with read or write operations or using with any entity framework, but let's go with empty controller to show the proper way of configuration. Okay, let's name this as employees controller. Okay, this controller is routed with API backslash controller. These square brackets will be replaced and control will be replaced with the employees. Instead of that, let's just remove and place this employees and API controller. As we discussed, this employees API control is inherited from controller base class. Okay, first of all, we need to register our employee DB context. Let's create the constructor for this for dependency injection. Now we have created a controller. The next step is like, let's register our employee DB context. Employee DB context. Okay, we know the way of dependencing these things. We are giving complete control over to the constructor to take care of these things. Context and assign assign our context to this employee context. And now we'll be try to read the list of employees information with the help of action result get employees, where employees is equals to, we know the employees are part of context, this dot context dot employees dot to list. Let's return okay if employee is not is equals to null, and we have some employees, means our employees count is greater than 0. Let's return okay of employees found any, otherwise simply return not found, means there are no employees present from our database. Let's add a breakpoint here before hitting F5. Let's build the solution for one last time and put one debugger in a DB context as well to show the on model create, and put one debugger and employees controller here because we are assigning our context to our local read-only property this dot context. Let's run this solution. In our next series, we will try to segregate these things. Instead of hard coding everything here, we'll implement data like dependency injection. I will see the repository pattern, how we'll be able to effectively utilize our repository pattern. we'll be able to use the same project, and we'll try to cover all the concept, majorly all the concept um, present in our entity framework. Okay, whoever is planning for ESP and core developer, please try to join this series, ESP and core series with Mr. Dear Docs. If you haven't subscribed my channel, please go and subscribe Mr. Dear Docs channel. Together we'll try to learn the things. Okay, if you see this, right, now we have an AEF core POC V1 with this swagger. Okay, in our next session we'll try to see how this swash bucket is by default registered in our project, and how manually we can be able to enable our swagger. If you haven't seen my previous videos, just to go and see how to enable swagger for our web app project. If you see, currently we have two controllers, one with employees and the another is like weather forecast, but with only two public action methods, that is get list of employees and get weather forecast employees information. If you expand this method is a simple to get the list of employees information. There are no parameters and the response is 200 success. And in the next upcoming videos, we'll see like what are the response types you can be able to add here, and how to rename this, and how to route this, and like how to restrict the parameters to like to accept only integers and all. Now this is the base project I'm setting for all other next to upcoming videos. Don't forget to complete this project. If you are seeing any issues in between, just try to post on my channel with your comments. I'll be able to help you. Okay, as I mentioned about, we'll try to learn things together. As I am referencing multiple projects and multiple documents to build these things together, to avoid you and to save some times to you. Okay, don't forget to see this video completely, and don't forget to subscribe and like my channel. We are at hand. Let's click try it out. Now we'll execute these ones and see if we are seeing any issues. Let's over this context and see, expand this and see whether we are able to see the departments. Expand this result view. There were four departments in our database, that is department ID 1 with department name HR. The same way here we can see, in the same way in the next upcoming session, why we were not able to see these employees. We'll see why we're not getting these employees and what is the reason behind for this. Okay, we'll try to discuss all these things in our upcoming session. Let's expand the employees and see. If you see this, right, there is an invalid column name department ID, means there is some issue with our department class. Okay, let's go and fix our department class, employees class. Here I'm having department DEPT ID. Let's come back to our employee DB context class, DEPT ID. It's correct only DEPT ID, department ID, employees, department ID is references to department ID only, employee. It's a public and integer. Yes, definitely it's an integer property, department ID. And in the employee DB context, we already mapped this department ID to DEPT ID. That's perfectly correct. Let's go and run the solution one more time. DEPT ID, that is correct. Let's run the solution one more time and see what exactly the issue is. Try it out, execute. Let's come back here and see what is the issue here. This is that context, employees, result view. Invalid column name department ID. Okay, it's not referencing to a proper department ID from employee. Let's go to this definition, DEPT ID. This is correct. Okay, let's come back to employee DB context. Employee ID, this is correct. Employee name is correct. Has column name of department ID. Has column name of department ID and department name. This is correct. Let's fix this issue and F10. Yes, there is an issue with the department ID. Invalid column name department ID, which is nothing but department ID integer. Let's expand our database tables. It is taking little time to expand the available tables in our employees information database. In between we can see these things like POCO classes, because we are using code first approach, right? Something we have missed. Public int department ID, public string department name. This is correct only. There is some issue with our department ID column only. What's wrong with this column? Let's come back here and select star from employees information. This is contains a column with the department ID. Okay, integer, and the same way we have department with the department ID as well. Let's come back here, and this department ID has a column name of department ID. That is correct. A DB set of employee department and employee table, tattoo table, employees. Employee ID reference has a column of employee name is have a column of department ID is also department ID. Here also the same way. DEPT ID, DEPT name. Let's come back to here employee class and check with this column public integer department ID get set. This is correct, but we'll see what is the exception we're getting. Invalid column name department. There is some catch with the department ID. Let's come back to employee DB context and we'll check this on model creating. What is the exact issue? Invalid column name department space department ID. And DEPT ID and come back to employee public int DEPT ID. It references to this property has column name of DEPT ID. What is the issue with the employees department ID? Let's come back here and try to reference this with foreign key. Control dot foreign key of DEPT ID. Let's stop this solution and run it once. It will take a couple of minutes to run the solution, and as usual, let's expand this and try to retrieve the list of employees information. Click on execute and come back to here. Let's see how it's resolving the context. Expand this, and as we have experienced the employees information issue rate, let's expand the result view once and see. Yeah, still we are getting the same exception, that is invalid column name department ID. Means still we are seeing the exception in the department ID. Let's come back to here. It's a foreign key of department ID. It is foreign key of department. Let's fix the annotation and try to run it once and see whether it resolves our issue or not. Let's come back, try it out, execute and see. Expand this employees. Yes, and now the issue is got now the issue got resolved, and we were able to see the department ID, employee ID, employee name. In the same way, try to expand the second one, the department ID, department name, department ID, employee ID, employee name. In our upcoming session, we'll try to see why the employee, like how to include department into employees while retrieving the list of information, so that we can be able to form a complete view model to show the list of employees information. For example, employee ID, like employee name, and which department ID is and which department he uh, belongs to. In the next session, we'll see how to include department to this employees information. Okay, in our upcoming session, we'll try to see this. Let's click continue and execute. Let's see. Employees means we are having employees information and the count is greater than 0. Okay, let's continue and show this list of employees information. Okay, if you see this here, we were able to retrieve list of employees information. In our upcoming session, we'll try to see how to retrieve the list of department information, along with how to include either employee or department in this context while showing the information into here. For example, if you see this, right, employee, we are able to see employee ID and which department he belongs to, but we are not able to see department name, and we are getting this department as null. In our upcoming session, we'll see how to fix these things. Okay, along with that, like the next session is like we'll try to read one more get method to see to retrieve the list of department information, and we'll try to include department name in this list, and we'll try to show the list of departments which the employees belongs to, and the same we will try to extend our context to read list of like couple of link queries. In our course we'll try to work with list of couple of link queries as well. This is all about for this EF core for this first session. Thanks for watching Mr. Dr. Docs channel. Don't forget to subscribe Mr. Dr. Docs channel. Stay tuned to our channel. Try to become an ASP.NET Core expert. Thanks for watching.